Hello, welcome to episode 158 of the Epic Film Challenge 2, 1001 Movies You Must See Before You Die. 1947's The Lady from Shanghai, an Orson Welles directed film starring Orson Welles and Rita Hayworth in the two lead roles. And obviously with Rita Hayworth in the lead role, she is the titular Lady from Shanghai. Orson Welles, what an intriguing career he had, and we talked about a few of his films in this challenge so far already. Touch of Evil, The Magnificent Ambersons. Haven't got to Citizen Kane yet, but I have seen it, and I'm looking forward to revisiting it at a later date to really delve into that film. It really is as great as people say it is. But The Lady from Shanghai, this was, I guess, a few years after Citizen Kane, 5-6 years, and Orson Welles and Rita Hayworth had a relationship, and I believe they'd split up before this film was made, and she was a bit keen to perhaps maybe recapture some of their, rekindle some of their romance. I think they were married and they got divorced around the time of this film being released or made. I'm not too sure on the exact timings of things, but it's definitely an interesting time to make a film with someone who you split up with, especially in a romantic setting like the one that we see in this film. And Orson Welles stars as Michael O'Hara, who's this Irish man who becomes entangled in the web of this very beautiful woman called Elsa, played by Rita Hayworth. And in a kind of move that the producer of the film was really not happy about, Orson Welles had Rita Hayworth cut off her long flowing red locks and dyed her hair platinum blonde, so short and blonde, a stark contrast to the image that she had coming off of a film like Gilda, where her image in that film was so iconic, almost instantly. And apparently the studio kind of blamed her haircut on the success of the movie, or non-success of the movie, where it didn't make as much money as they hoped because, well, she had blonde hair. And maybe that was true back in those days, where it was really just superficial. Right, if she hasn't got the red hair, we're not going to go see the movie. We want Gilda in the film. I don't know. But I just found it to be a really interesting point where there was actually a conversation in a film studio saying, well, we probably didn't make enough money because her hair was blonde, but maybe there was some truth to it. And Orson Welles apparently made this film out of desperation. He'd kind of become disillusioned with films, obviously coming off of The Magnificent Ambersons. He did a couple of other films after that, and studios playing around with the films that he was making, and he decided to move back to the stage, and he put on this huge production of Around the World in 80 Days. And there was a dispute there. He lost the money he needed, so he needed money fast, and so he agreed to make a film and star in it and produce it and all that kind of stuff. And, well, not produce, but direct, write, and star in it. Maybe produce as well, I'm not too sure. He basically just made a deal to make a movie so he could get the money to finish this stage production, as far as I'm aware. And it's based off a book from the 30s, and so he adapted that into the story that you see in the film. And again, I'm not even getting to the film yet, but it's really interesting to me how Orson Welles' filmography is so coloured by studio intervention. Apparently his original cut of Lady from Shanghai was over 2.5 hours long. The cut we have is 1 hour and 27 minutes. That's a lot being cut out of a film, and so people keep saying it. I looked through the special features on the new Blu-ray that just came out, and that's how I saw the film. They say how this film really is just a shadow of what he intended. It really isn't the film Orson Welles wanted to make. A lot of close-ups of Rita Hayworth were ordered by the studio. They didn't like him not going super close onto this star. They wanted more close-ups of Rita Hayworth to sell the movie with. So they filmed that later, kind of pickups, because they just wanted more of her face and more glamorizing of her image, and that's not what he wanted to do with the character. So it really is kind of, you have to kind of guess, which parts were really what he wanted and which parts weren't, I suppose. And that seems to be the case for so many of his films, and it's really unfortunate. It'd be great to kind of see that original vision. But the story follows the guy, Michael O'Hara, and he does an Irish accent in the film, which was pretty good, I thought. And he becomes entangled with this woman and ends up kind of working on a cruise ship that she is on with her rich husband, played by Everett Sloane, Mr. Bannister. He was great in the film. I really liked his performance as this, I guess he was they would call it a cripple back in those days, where he'd have to walk around on crutches and stuff. It gave him a bit more character, but also his performance I thought was really layered. Like, I was never quite sure exactly what he was thinking about the situation, because it felt like he knew that Michael was in love with his wife and he was maybe letting it happen. And that's what's the main strength of this film, I think, is the mystery involved in it, and trying to figure out what all the characters are doing. Bannister's business partner is also a big part of the film, and he is a really intriguing villainous character in the film who really gets involved in this kind of love triangle between the main characters. So there's a lot of interesting characters. I felt like Orson Welles as Michael O'Hara was not very interesting, and his performance was good, but it didn't feel like he was, I don't know, there was something about it that didn't quite capture me that much. He just seemed to be a vessel for the story, not a fully formed character that I could get behind. Rita Hayworth was fantastic. Just she's a brilliant actress, I thought. She really conveys a lot without saying anything, which is always a sign of a good actor. But particularly toward the end of the film, just some of those kind of, I don't want to spoil too much, but just some of those looks on her face towards the end of the film really just were impressive and just drew me into the screen. And Everett Sloane as well, I thought was really, really good. And it goes around the place. They go on a cruise, so they go around to different tropical places and stuff, and then we come back to San Francisco. And I don't want to give too much away about the plot, but Michael gets involved far too deep with this woman. And there's a lot of plot going on that, and when I say there's a lot of plot, I don't mean that it's confusing, but there's a lot of things to keep up with and to keep yourself guessing where it's going to go. And I won't say too much more than that, I think, but I really, really enjoyed the film. There are these brief moments of brilliance that you can clearly tell have Orson Welles' fingerprints all over them, particularly the end of the film, which takes place, well, not the very end, well, I guess it's pretty much the end of the film. There's a sequence in a fun house at a fairground, and particularly there's a scene with a lot of mirrors. Incredibly shot, just brilliantly put together, and really added so much to what was going on with the characters in that mirror room. I thought it just packed such a punch and was such a visually brilliant way to round off the story with that climactic moment, like proper cinematic moment with those mirrors and just the way that it was shot. Loved it. And there's a couple of moments in that fun house before the mirrors as well, which felt very much of the Dr. Caligari style of just like the painted distortion and stuff like that. And I read that Orson Welles actually showed people who were working on the film Dr. Caligari when they were making it or before they were making it, so clearly that was an influence as well in that last sequence. Overall though, I would go back to it again. It's just there's an odd tone to it. There's a courtroom scene which is very humorous in tone when I felt like it shouldn't be. Like the rest of the film didn't feel like that, so it felt a bit disjointed. But apparently dreams and nightmares were kind of something Orson Welles was thinking about when he was making this film. I don't really see that much myself. I mean, I read that and I didn't really get that vibe. But I just thought that it was a really good story and some really good performances. And just Orson Welles himself was perhaps just a little bit uninteresting in the whole thing. But, I mean, I said it with Magnificent Ambersons, I'll say it with this. If this is a pale kind of, lesser version of what he really intended, then Jesus, what would the full vision have been like, and we can only speculate, I guess. But if this is someone whose film has been kind of tampered with, and kind of the score being one instance, he created a temp score, and he had all these ideas for sound and dropping sound out and things like that, and those were disregarded, and the studio just hired someone to do a very typical score. And I found the score fine, but it did feel very just typical 40s, 50s, like that kind of a routine score, it felt like. So yeah, just again, the studio, I think, and I'm taking some of this from some of the special features on the Blu-ray, but Simon Callow did a interview talking about Orson Welles. He had a great point, how Orson Welles was kind of born and in a very, very early age was told that he had something special. Everything he did was special. He would orchestrate these school plays. People would say he's brilliant. He would do this radio in his earlier young adult life, and people would say he's brilliant. He did Citizen Kane, and people told him he was brilliant. And so he was operating under this kind of this idea that he's the guy, he is the maestro. And so when he would work with studios, and they would push against some of the stuff he was doing, he would push back, and he wouldn't try to compromise because he thought he had this genius, you know. And in a lot of ways he really did. I mean, you look at Citizen Kane, Jesus, 25 years old, incredible. But it just seems to be that there seems to be something that he was doing to kind of end up with the studios messing with his films all the time. And that might be a good theory, that he kind of had almost a god complex about his own creativity inside his head. And even if it was warranted, the fact that he wouldn't compromise, or the fact that he would just not play the game as much, was a detriment to his final films, because not his final films, but like the final version of the films that got released. Because whenever you kind of look into an Orson Welles film that isn't Citizen Kane, there's some story of, you know, they wouldn't let him do it the way he wanted to. And I read a funny, well, I guess it's not that funny, but I found it funny, a quote where someone said that, I think one of the producers of this film said they wouldn't hire Orson Welles to produce, write, direct, and star again because he couldn't fire him, because he needed him to do all these things. But anyway, The Lady from Shanghai, is it a film you should see before you die? Yes, I think it is. I think Orson Welles was an incredible filmmaker, and I thought this was a really good film. Really good film. The mystery's good. Rita Hayworth just, you know, just lights her screen up. She's just has such a charisma to her. She's one of those people who's just born to be in front of a camera, and to have that kind of enigmatic aura to her that really draws you into stuff that she does, at least from what I've seen anyway. And it's interesting to look at it and think that this is just a shell of what he wanted to do, and it kind of makes your imagination run wild. But particularly for that last sequence in the funhouse alone, I think it is a film you should definitely see. Really enjoyed it, and let me know if you've seen it and your thoughts on this film or any other of Orson Welles' films. I really need to go and see everything that he did, I think, at this point, and kind of yeah, get more of a perspective on his entire filmography. I think I want to do that before I go back to Citizen Kane. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.